The Cannabis Heals Me podcast, episode 80.
You're listening to the Cannabis Heals Me podcast, where we explore the real stories of real people who have discovered the profound healing properties of the cannabis plant in their own lives. Find more at cannabishealsme.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Cannabis Heals Me podcast. This is your host, Rachel Kennerly, and I'm coming to you once again from the Storybook Inn Studios. If you are a government employee or work for a bank, or maybe you go to a school, I don't know, a lot of people are off today because it is Veterans Day. And I thought in honor of Veterans Day, I would actually bring on a guest who is a veteran. I've interviewed several vets for this show to have them talk about their experience with using cannabis to treat a variety of ailments. And so I'm going to bring on another veteran. But before we get to that, I want to go ahead and encourage you to go out and subscribe to the podcast. And while you're out there subscribing, if you have not done so already, and I know there are a lot of you that have not, because I see the download numbers and I see how many ratings we have, go out and give us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever app you're using to access this show. It looks like the bulk of you are using an Apple iPhone. And if that's the case, while you are subscribing, you can go ahead and rate or review the podcast. If you give us a review, I will actually read your review on the air. Now, if for some reason you don't think you're eloquent enough, send me an email and say, hey, don't read my review on the air. But if you would review us, we would really appreciate you doing that. And the reason I ask you to do this, Apple Podcasts, and I'm pretty sure all the other podcast apps are the same way, they will actually share the show with other people that are listening to similar type programs. So the more people that rate or review it, the more people Apple will actually recommend our podcast to. That means we get these stories into more earballs, as my friend Daniel says, and we get more people listening and realizing that cannabis is medicine. So go out, and while you're subscribing, and even if you don't subscribe, but I highly recommend you subscribe, go ahead and please give us a rating or review, and I will read that review on the air. If you don't want me to read it on the air, email me, podcast@cannabishealsme.com. The other thing I'm going to ask you to subscribe to is our email newsletter list. If you go out to cannabishealsme.com/subscribe, you can type your email address into the box, hit the enter sign, and that will sign you up for our email newsletter list. That gives us a way to contact you directly without having to worry about Facebook or Instagram or whatever social media platform we're using shadow banning us and not being able to reach you. So go ahead and sign up for our email newsletter list. Go out to cannabishealsme.com/subscribe. Our guest today is April Martinez. She is a veteran of the Afghanistan war, and she was medically retired in November of 2011. April has been diagnosed with chronic migraines and PTSD, and her story is a little different from some of the other vets that we've actually spoken to. She used to live in Washington State, where she could get legal access to cannabis, but she and her husband moved back to the state of Texas in 2016. And since moving back to the state of Texas, she is limited to managing her symptoms only with prescription medications. So she's going to share with us what her experience was in Washington when she was able to use cannabis legally versus the state of Texas, where she can only use prescription drugs to manage her pain. April, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I had the great honor over the Labor Day weekend to listen to you speak at the Texas Marijuana Policy Conference, and I wanted you to come on and share your story with the listeners.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So you were in former military, correct?
I was.
Now, y'all haven't always lived in Texas. Y'all originally, as a military person, you probably lived all over the place.
We've had a couple stops along the way.
I was hoping that you could share with us what your medical condition is and what your experience was living in a state where you could get legal access to cannabis versus kind of what you're faced with now living in the state of Texas.
Sure. Well, I guess it started shortly before I left Afghanistan. I was deployed from 2006 to 2007, a total of 16 months to Afghanistan. And I didn't think much of it when I was there, but a couple months prior to returning home, I started having these dizzy spells and a couple times had to take a knee when I was just walking. And shortly after I returned home, I started having headaches, and they weren't that bad starting out, but they became more common, and then the intensity was increased as well. And by the time we had come to Texas in the fall of 2007, they were getting to be where it was a couple times a week.
Oh, wow.
By the next year, it was 24/7.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's when I started seeking more intense care through the neurologist on post rather than just my regular PCM.
Did you have like, because several of the people that I've spoken to, they had like a traumatic incident that caused some, neurological damage. Did you have any sort of experience like that?
I did not have any TBIs while I was in country, or really any incident that they could really pinpoint and say this was the start or this was the root cause. I've been diagnosed with a couple different things, anywhere from chronic daily migraine and also PTSD. But the migraine was a first diagnosis, and the PTSD diagnosis came a couple of years after I had already been retired. And so depending on what doctor I go to, some of them think maybe the PTSD came first and the migraines are a result of. Others think the migraines originated from somewhere, and then the PTSD is kind of an add-on to that because of the everyday pain and the everyday stress. So more so of like a mood disorder, because you're not generally happy when you feel horrible each and every day.
Oh, absolutely.
Still to this day, I don't have a very clear answer from anybody, and part of my journey is kind of even accepting that part, that I might not ever have a real answer of what made me sick.
Yeah, it's hard enough to be sick, but then if you can't even figure out, well, what actually made me sick, I'm sure that's very frustrating.
It is, because I think if you have an idea, well, you got something you can work towards. You can fix it, or at least have a good idea of how to fix it. With me, I kind of just, it's like throwing everything up against the wall and seeing what sticks. And that can be really frustrating for patients.
Yeah. So you said by 2008, you had a headache that was nonstop. Were you still active military at that time, or had you gotten out?
I was. No,
oh, wow.
I did not get retired until November of 2011.
Oh, wow.
And so throughout that time, it was really just starting to explore, what is this? What's going to work? And starting out with all the common medications that are kind of given to you when you start getting headaches and migraines, and had a couple hospitalizations on post for 3 days or so at a time, where they would try the infusion therapy with the DH.
Now, what is that?
So one of the more common infusions that you can get as a migraine patient is something called DHE. I've done it a couple different ways. I've had to be in the hospital for a 3-day stint to have it done continuously. I've also done it on the civilian side, where I'd go in twice a week to the cancer center at Scott and White and would do an infusion that was usually about 3 or 4 hours from start to finish or so. And it's supposed to be a nice high dose medicine that would hopefully block the pain and the migraines and create a break. But for me, it never worked.
Even with this hospitalization, the infusion therapy, you're still having headaches nonstop?
They have been 24/7 nonstop since 2008, and
wow.
experiencing since 2007 of at least some form. The way it is now, it kind of fluctuates in pain. So this morning I woke up and it wasn't so bad. It was probably about a 4 or a 5, which is really about my lowest that I go these days.
Wow.
My normal or my low used to be like a 2 or a 3, but it seems as time goes on, that number kind of rises a little bit. And then it can vary throughout the day, depending on a number of things. It could be stress, it could be light, it could be maybe something I ate, it could be certain smells, maybe noises, and then sometimes it could be nothing at all. And these waves just come, and I can quickly escalate to a 7, 8, 9, and sometimes a 10.
How do you function? I mean, you're working full time, and the listeners don't know this, but I know this. But you have 4 kids.
Well, when I was in the military for a while, it was really just me and my husband. We didn't become parents until 2010 when we actually became foster parents. We were still doing military, and it was a really hard path for us. We had tried to be parents for a number of years, and doing it on our own, just it wasn't working. And we had a lot of loss and heartbreak with that. And then we got placed with twin boys that we ended up adopting a year later in May of 2011. Just a couple, like 2 weeks after that, Sammy had to go to Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
So,
And how old were the boys at this time?
well, they came to us when they were 6 months old, and we adopted them just a couple months before their second birthday.
Okay. Wow. So you've got two 2-year-olds.
Yes.
Whew.
And then, unbeknownst to us at the time, we were dealing with some special needs that the symptoms were there, but we wouldn't get a clear diagnosis yet for a couple of years. So it was a little bit of a difficult time
Oh,
with
yeah.
me trying to figure out what was going on with my health and still try to make everything work. And then having the twins back here with myself and Sam gone, it was a little difficult. And he actually ended up coming home a couple of weeks before the rest of his unit because it was getting very hard for me health-wise, and there were treatments that I couldn't do at the hospital if he wasn't here.
Yeah, because who's going to watch the boys?
Right. So in the early days, I think it was a little easier to get on because it didn't feel like a long-term thing to me at that time. It felt like I just have to figure out what this is. But I still had a good bit of functionality in the early days. Like I said, my most of my pain was generally about a 2, 3, or 4 on the really good days, and I didn't spike that much until later on. But more recently, it's been getting harder. I'd say since about 2013 or so, it's definitely made more of an impact on my life. And I've really had to find ways to manage my life in a way that revolves around my pain level or the possible escalation of my pain level. And that has been extremely hard for me, just on the emotional side of having to deal with that, because I've always been very social and I love being in the community. I'm a volunteer at heart. I've always done it, some form of volunteer ever since I was a little kid. And having to step away from a lot of those things that kind of fills my heart and gives me energy was really hard, on top of having the pain. I feel like you constantly are losing a little piece of yourself just to be able to survive and get to the next day.
So you're not in the military anymore, right?
No.
When did you officially get out?
November of 2011 is when I was medically retired. And I initially thought that I'd be able to go and find another job, something that was not going to be as taxing on me and that I could still do. But the more I went into the job search, the more I started realizing I have these limitations, and it just wasn't going to work. And as it went on over the years, becoming more and more limited just was not a realistic goal for me to find a traditional job. I'm still hoping that one way or another over the years I'll find something that maybe I can have some flexibility in. But most employers don't want to hire people if every other day or so you're having to leave because you're so nauseous you can't talk, or all your cognitive skills went out the window and you're flubbing words to people and you can't think very well.
Yeah, that is a tough challenge for sure. Well, is your husband, is he still in the military, or is he retired as well?
He is not. He retired in 2016. Shortly after we came back here. We were up in Washington for a couple of years. He was planning on retiring earlier, and we had bought this house in Texas and planned for it to be our forever home and possibly even do some more foster care. And then the Army said, nope, you're going up to Washington. And that was in 2012. So we packed up our stuff and we went. And I loved it up there. It was a great experience. And he had wanted to stay in a little bit longer, but the Army said, well, there's no positions unless you want to go to Korea or whatnot. We had already spent a lot of time apart as a family. And after 23 years, he decided, well, that's enough. We'll get up now and we'll go back to Texas and we'll try to make it work down there.
Now, when you say Washington, is it Washington State or Washington, D.C.?
Washington State.
Okay.
Although I have lived in Washington, D.C. before, and that was also a great experience.
So if we played bingo of the U.S. map, you would probably have bingo blackout, right?
Very close. Very close.
Now, I'm sure you are dealing with all sorts of different medications that are being prescribed, trying to get your headaches under control and your pain managed. When did cannabis come on your radar?
Well, it was about, let me see, 2015. My daughter was almost a year old at that time. And I was actually in therapy for PTSD type symptoms and depression because it was a very hard time for me that summer. I felt like it was just kind of all crashing in on me. I didn't feel I was being the best parent, particularly to the boys who have special needs. I felt they needed a mom who was more involved and could give them more energy. And at the time, it was really hard for me to do because of how I felt every single day.
Yeah, I mean, we suffer with enough mom guilt as it is, but if you're dealing with a crippling medical condition on top of that, I can't even fathom.
It was hard, and at the same time, trying to come across as we're normal. There's nobody wants to be around people generally that are always mopey and are always very obvious that they're in pain or they're not feeling good. And sometimes that's not hard, or that's hard to hide, but I try really hard when I'm out in public and out with people to not appear to be miserable. So that, like I said, that summer was just really hard, and I'm not feeling good about myself. The pain is just becoming way too much, and I'm not getting a break in it, and I'm on all these different medications. At the time, it was 8 different pills, and then some of those I was taking multiple times a day. So it could be upwards from 15 to 20 some pills depending on the day.
Wow.
And it didn't feel like it was working. And I felt very dark. And so during that period, I was talking to one of my providers, and they suggested that I look into cannabis. And it was
like a medical provider?
It was a medical provider, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Through the VA or private practice?
Well, that one I won't say because the organization that this provider worked with did not condone or promote cannabis use.
Yeah. But that's incredible to hear that they would recommend it, because we know how the medical profession as a whole, especially doctors, feel about cannabis.
And I think that can be true. However, the more that I've come to discuss this topic with providers, even here, my providers here in Texas, especially the ones that deal with patients like me on a routine basis, of people who just really have these sometimes lifelong illnesses, and it takes out a lot of their daily life when it's chronic. I feel that they're becoming more receptive to, at very least, the conversation, and then sometimes beyond that, even the use.
Hey guys, wanted to tell you real quick about our podcast host and sponsor, Anchor.fm. If you're thinking about starting your own podcast, I highly recommend Anchor. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. They'll distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go out to Anchor.fm to get started. That's Anchor.fm. Now back to the show. Oh, that's encouraging, especially in this state.
I agree. I wasn't expecting it. So in Washington, the provider up there suggested that I take a look into it. And I was a little hesitant at first for a number of reasons, but one of them was the opinion of my spouse, because I know that he does not agree any kind of drug use.
Well, it's very frowned upon in the military. I mean, you can actually get bounced if
Oh,
you.
yes. And he's done it. As a first sergeant, he's had to dismiss people from the military and put in packets because of their drug use. So it took a couple conversations between him and I for him to understand that this was different and the science behind it. And then ultimately, I don't have anything else to try at that point. This was really the last thing that I could hope for that was going to give me some kind of relief. I've had pain relief in a way with like Percocet and oxycodone and stuff like that, but it wasn't in the same sense. It was very much that like pilly high kind of feeling, not adding to the functionality necessarily.
Yeah, not really present in your own life.
Right. It was more of just like a complete head high to me. So I had used those medications, but I wasn't exactly thrilled about using them. I had talked to a couple other female veterans up there that I knew that had also been using cannabis for different things and got some input. And then I decided to go and get it. And I actually got a liquid form that I really liked. It came like in the little Mio bottles that you would add to water. What I liked about this was how easy it was to measure exactly what I needed. So I was taking it just like I was taking any of my other prescriptions within a specified dose. So I could really kind of play with it and see what was working, what wasn't, what exactly I needed at different levels of pain. And within, I'd say probably about a month and a half or 2 months, I was completely off all but one of my medications.
Oh, wow. And you were taking like 15 to 20 pills a day sometimes?
Right.
Wow.
Some of them were referred to as rescue meds for when the pain just gets really unbearable. And you only have so many pills of those that you can take a day. One of them, I was only allowed, I think, 9 pills a month for a rescue med, because the more you take them, the more it can actually cause issues with pain. Yeah, it's kind of contradictory.
Yeah.
So a number of them were preventative medications, but the problem with that for somebody who experiences 24/7 chronic pain is that the preventatives don't work as well as they would for somebody who experiences some kind of break in their pain. And for me, because I wasn't getting even a minute of that downtime without pain, it just wasn't really working. But we kept trying things. And then there was the injections. I would get Botox, nerve blocks, things like that. And none of those would really work either, but this did. And I remember the first week that I was using it, I sat down and I read a book for the first time. At that time, it had probably been 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Because of some of the problems I have with reading is I'll get to the bottom of the page and I won't remember anything that I just read. I feel not so bright with that one. And it made me really sad because I love learning and I love exploring and taking in new things, and reading's a big part of that.
Yeah.
Or even finishing my college classes, I had to stop those because I couldn't keep up with the reading assignments and the textbooks to be able to complete those assignments. It was so much for my brain to handle at that time. So when I read that first book, and then the next week I went and I got another book and I read that book, I felt like I was on cloud 9.
I can only imagine.
It was a big moment for me. And on top of that, I would find that if I would use the medication, I wasn't spending as much time upstairs in my room with the windows drawn and ice packs and the no noise, which with 2 toddlers, excuse me.
Yeah, that's impossible.
Needs, yeah, it's dang near impossible. But instead, I was able to be up and doing things like vacuuming, which sounds like a small task for most, but when you have this this constant pain. For me, I carry a lot of pain in my neck and my shoulders because of the occipital migraines that I have. And so vacuuming sometimes can be hard, moving that arm back and forth when everything is so sore. And then on top of that, the noise.
Right. Yeah, because vacuum cleaner's loud.
They are loud, yeah. And or washing dishes or taking a walk up the block to the park so the kids can play. Because the noise of the kids sometimes, or my muscles can get very weak when I have really intense occipital pain. And so even walking can be hard for me sometimes. I can do it. It takes a lot of energy to make my legs move. So all those really little things that I felt like I was missing out on, I started to get back slowly. And to me, it was life changing in that time that I was able to experience those things again. I could be present. I could be more involved, especially in helping the boys when we had to do extra things to help with their conditions. It made me feel like I regained some of my life and that I had possibilities again in my future. I had already started planning on enrolling again in college and taking college classes shortly before we ended up moving back here to Texas. And then the move happened and we came back here and it felt like I had a big door slammed in my face and that I was about to be viewing my life as extremely diminished again.
Yeah.
Having so much hope when I had left Washington and then coming back here and feeling like I didn't have any hope and having to go back on all these medications to try to get some relief. And it didn't work out very well. And it really was just a couple months of us being home when I had thought about when we were in Washington and we were seeing all of the activity around the bills that were being presented at the time to allow recreational up there. And I said, well, there has to be something here in Texas. There has to be a group here in Texas that's working for this, because I remember when we were gone, the teacup program was happening. And so I started doing some internet searches and I found a group that was in fact advocating for change here in Texas. And I contacted them to see what I could do to help with that movement. And it gave me some purpose again. If what I need is not here and not available, then I felt it was my responsibility to step up and to educate people on this plant and the medical benefits that it has for chronic pain patients.
Now, what was your attitude towards cannabis before you considered it as medicine? Because I grew up as a kid of the 80s and I totally bought the dare narrative.
Well, I too was an 80s child, and I didn't view it as something that was really, really bad. My view of it was that if you treated it like you did any other substance, like alcohol, for instance, that it was okay. I remember even in my early 20s hearing of people that were using it for glaucoma or these other things. And truthfully, on the medical front, I did not understand that part at all. And I believe that these people that were saying they were using it medically, well, yeah, okay, I got glaucoma too.
Yeah.
They were just trying to find a way. And until I had started using it as a patient, I really didn't understand that side. And it prompted me to look into it more, as much as I was able to with being able to read and whatnot. But I found that there are a lot of properties that help patients like me. And I started to look at the plant more in the medicinal terms rather than just the recreational side of the effects that it had on people. And as I was able to take in more information and hear different people speak on the plant, a lot of it really started to make sense with me of why this is working. And when I looked at it just as I would with any other medication that I took, this one made more sense to me. It didn't have the side effects that a lot of my other medications have. It gave me more functionality. And for the pain, it didn't necessarily take away all my pain. I can tell that the pain is there, but it wasn't at the forefront anymore. It was kind of pushed to the back of my mind so that I could still go and do what I needed to do within reason, but that pain wasn't controlling all of my actions anymore.
Now, thanks to the most recent legislative session, CBD oil, which most of the country had legal access to before Texas, CBD oil is legal in Texas. Does that help, or does your body really need some of that THC to help?
So for me, I have tried it both ways. When we came back to Texas and the THC option was not there for me, I did try just CBD products. And in fact, I was using Charlotte's Web oil that I ordered. And it was quite expensive. It was not easy to validate buying it because at the time it was about $500 a bottle.
Oh my gosh.
The strength that I would eat. Yeah, it's pretty expensive, but I did find a program that helped out patients like myself, and I was able to get a reduced rate, but it was still about $275 or so, I think, a month. And while I found that it helped a little bit, it didn't go above and beyond with some of my medications I was already on were doing. So I couldn't look at that and validate the price, the money I was sending out, because not being able to work, I have to rely on the income that I currently have. And $300 is a lot of money every month for not seeing a huge difference. Now, that's just my experience. I know a lot of people who have stuck to just CBD products and have seen a lot of improvement. For me, I feel that the THC is necessary in order to help with that pain factor. I found the CBD did give me help in areas of like the cognitive skills that I needed. But when it came to the pain and the functionality that I need during an intense attack, the CBD alone was not cutting it. Really, with what Teacup even has now with the advancement of adding these different qualifying conditions, truthfully, it still wouldn't be enough, I believe, to help somebody like me, because it's what's offered now in Texas is really just a smidge above the CBD that you can get down on the corner at the local store.
Right. Because they just jacked it up to 0.5, a whopping 0.5%.
Right.
And your medical conditions, would you even qualify under Teacup, under the expanded conditions that they listed?
No, not under the current ones. Originally, when the bills were put forth, if all of those conditions would have been approved, then I would have. The chronic pain and the PTSD factor, however, were taken off somewhere between from the House and going to the Senate and then debated on the Senate floor. That was a huge hit. I was really hopeful with, especially the things like the autism and MS and stuff like that being added, that we would also be taken into consideration. And
yeah, I think a lot of the veterans felt that way, and it was a real slap in the face. Didn't was it a senator or representative that got up and just basically accused veterans of, making up their conditions in order to qualify under this Teacup program?
There were two senators, Senator Campbell and I believe Senator Birdwell, that were debating this bill on the floor and some of the qualifying conditions. And it did seem, specifically with the PTSD and the veteran aspect, that they were adamant that this one not be added. And for the one point, Senator Campbell, she stated what she perceived as correct information on the Senate floor, and it was not correct. It was really actually far from any of the available studies, saying I believe it was like 70% of veterans have THC in their system after they committed suicide, and that's not accurate at all. And to this day, she still has not presented a study that confirms what she quoted.
Or probably hasn't apologized for making an incorrect statement either.
Right. And I think that is really important. I think overall in today's political arena, I think it's very hurtful for any politician to go and state things that are not true. And it happens to all of us. Some of us misspeak quite often. But once you realize that you have made a mistake or there's some kind of inaccuracies, I think it's really important as a public leader to come forward and fix what you have done. If you were wrong, then say you're wrong. If you were misinformed, then say you were misinformed. And as far as I know, from what I've seen, that hasn't happened yet on her part. Senator Birdwell, that one kind of hurt a little bit more because he is a decorated veteran, and he certainly went through some very hard times after being injured at the Pentagon. And his journey to healing was different than what some of us have to experience when we're healing. And I'm very happy that he has found a way to heal some of those injuries and to go on with his life in the way that he was able to. That's absolutely amazing. But his path is not everybody's path. And some of us need different things to help us. And so with the comments that he gave, saying in so many terms of not to listen or not to trust these veterans that are sick, that are disabled or missing limbs, it did feel like a slap in the face because he is a veteran. And you would hope that among veterans, they would have compassion and understanding for their fellow brother and sister, even if that road is not the same as theirs. And to say not to listen to us or don't to trust us, it was very, very hard to take because I feel like I am a trustworthy person. I feel like I'm a good citizen and I have truths to be told. And I don't appreciate somebody else diminishing my experience because it's different from theirs.
Exactly. I mean, it'd be like any other medical treatment. I mean, he's not a doctor.
Right.
How does he know what you guys need? He doesn't. And
Right.
just to pretend as though he does is just, like you said, a slap in the face. You know, just because he was able to heal without it doesn't mean that that's the only way to heal. You know, that'd be like trying to pigeonhole the doctor and say, you can only treat cancer this way. You can only treat, this medical condition that way.
I agree. But I do have to say a little bit on his benefit that his office has been a little bit more receptive to the veterans that have contacted him after those comments were made. And he did sit down with one individual in the veteran group that I advocate with and have a discussion about his comments and how that affected the rest of us.
Oh, that's good. That's promising.
It's promising. At least it's a step to listening to the other side. And so I'm not aware of any public comments, not to say that there aren't any expanding on his comments from the floor that day or trying to amend anything. But I am happy that he took time and sat down to listen to one of the veterans who has had benefits from this medication.
Well, if a veteran is listening, or really anybody is listening to the show, what would you suggest as far as if somebody says, look, this is medicine to me, I want to become more politically active. What is your suggestion for them as far as how to do that or where to start?
I think there are so many opportunities for veterans and patients in general to be active in this movement. For me, the first step I took, like I said, was going online and doing a search to see what organizations are out there. And there are plenty, and there's more being formed every day, especially within the veteran community. So there's kind of always somewhere that you can help out. Even for the people who maybe are not able to go and lobby up at the Capitol or attend a lot of events, sending emails, calling your representatives and your senators about these bills when they're presented on the floor, writing letters to your representatives and senators. Those things actually matter. And I didn't understand the weight that those actions have on them until I attended one of the trainings up at the Capitol that was presented by Texas Normal. And those things, every time that you write or call or email, those things are logged. And they use those numbers in order to hopefully help them vote the way their constituents want when the bills come up for a vote. But if you are not reaching out and you are not telling your representatives and your senators that this is how you feel on it, then they might be more inclined to vote how they personally feel or how they think their constituents might want them to vote, just based on maybe party lines or where they live. And what we've come to see is that there's overwhelming support from both parties, and a majority of people in Texas want people to have access to this medication. But if you don't speak up, then your voice is not heard and it's not going to be represented up in Austin. And so I would say that would be the first big step. You have to speak out, you have to let your wishes known and go and vote. If you don't like that your representative or your senator is not defending this medication and trying to expand access here in Texas, then find a candidate that will and vote for them. Things aren't going to change if we don't get the right people up in the Capitol. But even with that, there's still a lot other that you can do. You can make donations to organizations that help advocate for this medicine. The lobbyists that are up there and the events and stuff that are held, they don't happen on their own. And fortunately, everything takes money these days. So if you can help provide a little bit of support for those people that are in the fight, so to speak, that are at the Capitol doing this legwork, it helps a lot. It helps things keep running. There's no action too small that it won't help make a difference. Anything that anybody can do is going to help propel this movement here in Texas.
Have you ever thought about moving to a state where you can get legal access to cannabis?
Yes, I have almost every day. The problem that I have with that, well, there's actually a couple. One, we own our home here. While I would definitely like to go up north because I miss it, I don't want to have to sell my house and uproot my children and go somewhere else just because of my medical needs. As a mom, it feels selfish to me to do that to my family, particularly because, like I said, the boys have a lot of special needs, and when you need a lot of medical care or support, having to transfer all that to go to a new state, oh, it's a nightmare. I will avoid that at all costs, to have to find new doctors and new therapists and new psychiatrists and everything else that they might need. It's quite a feat.
Yeah. Well, and we sold our home last year and just moved like a few miles down the road, and that was tough for my son. I think from kids from hard places that have been kind of bounced around when they were young, those transitions are difficult.
Yes, I mean, I think it would be hard for any kid, but when you have children with different needs, I think sometimes that can impact them a little bit more. And so I continue to keep certain places in my mind of where I would like to go if the opportunity arises. But I can't say at this point that I'm willing to put my medical needs above the well-being of my family.
Well, I can certainly understand and respect that. I feel for you. I to have been in a state where it was legal and you were able to not be on a ton of medications, and then to have to come back to Texas and have politicians standing between you and medication is very frustrating.
It is, especially when you look at all the states that are surrounding us.
Yeah, I mean, every state around us.
I mean, I could go a couple, well, maybe not west because it takes forever
yeah,
to get to that side of the state, but pretty much you can go in any direction for a couple hours and reach a state where you could get what you needed medically.
Now, didn't New Mexico, didn't they just start saying that they would issue patient cards to Texas residents?
I have heard that. I've vaguely read one story on it, so I can't say that I'm an expert in those new laws, but Um, I think it's a step, but then you have to worry about, are you staying in New Mexico to
Yes, you
consume
still
that?
can't bring it back. That's
You
right.
still, right. And especially along that side of the border, it's, if you were to transport things across lines, I don't think that would be my first choice considering all the border patrol check stops that they have over there.
Right. Well, and then you've got another issue that you have to deal with because you're a mom. You don't want, what the foster care system like. It sucks. And I would never do anything to put my family in danger of especially, having come out of that system, of potentially having to go back in. So I totally understand where you're coming from on that.
Yes, being on the side of being a foster parent and then an adoptive parent, I remember every single time my boy's case was being heard in court, which is usually once a month on a Friday, I would be there. I'd take leave or get a pass from work so that I could go. And I remember hearing these stories, one case after another, of what the parents did or didn't do for having their children removed. And I would never want to be on the side where I would have to validate that I was a good parent or have to answer why my children were taken away because of my actions. That scares me all the time to think about that. And even just as advocating as I had been brings a spotlight on me and on the family. And that in itself has been difficult in a way because my husband and I have always tried very hard to be the best parents that we can be to all of our children, but specifically helping the boys with what they need to progress. And to have someone look at us as though we're less than or we're inept in any kind of way because of a medicine that has helped me is really disheartening. And I don't know what I would do if we found ourselves on the other side of being examined and looked at because of my medical choices.
Well, I'm hoping that something in the next legislative session will break loose, and people like yourself and a lot of the other vets that I've talked to, and just a lot of the people that I've talked to that are here in the state, will have safe legal access to a plant. It's a plant, for crying out loud.
I'm hoping so as well. And I am optimistic in sorts. We made a lot of leeway between the first time that I advocated in 2016 and then this session this last time. And I know it upset a lot of people and they didn't feel like it was enough. It didn't go far enough. It wasn't inclusive enough. The levels weren't enough in a lot of respects. I do agree with that. But this is Texas. And to see how slowly ideas like this move within the legislature was really eye-opening to me. When I watched it in Washington, of course, I was kind of an outsider then. I wasn't involved in the movement like I'm here, but it seemed like it was more fast-paced. And here it seems to be going incredibly slow.
Yeah.
However, progress is progress, at least how I'm looking at it. There are now autistic children and their families who have access to this medication and protections that they wouldn't have before. And that's huge. It might not be helping me specifically, but it's helping another patient and another family out there somewhere. But at the same time, it's also incredibly frustrating because here, only having session every 2 years, it feels like a very long period of time in between each session. Of course, there's always work to be doing on the advocate side, but as a patient, it's a long time.
Yes.
And I was really heartbroken this last session to sit and think of another 2 years that I have to go through this and figure out how I'm going to make this work in my life and how I'm going to keep going on for another day. Because with my condition, some people end up finding the ticket and it makes them better. And then there's other people who never get relief from this. And after 12 years, I guess there's a small part of me that still has a little bit of hope that one day I'll wake up and I won't have the difficulties I have now.
Yeah.
But my logical brain says that this is my life now, and this is how my life is going to be. And at 39 years old, that's a really long time, considering just this 12 years, the effect that it's had on me. And so it's kind of heartbreaking in that aspect, because for chronic pain patients, at least for myself, I find that every day is a struggle. Every time I go to a therapy session, or I try a new medication, or I simplify my life even a little bit more than it was before to try to reduce some of that activity and that stress, it's really, I'm doing all this just to make it again till tomorrow. I'm not working towards a cure. I'm not working towards getting my life back the way it was. I am working towards it being enough that I can still be here tomorrow.
I mean, you're just in survival mode.
I am.
Just to start the next day all over again.
Yeah. And that's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because who wants to wake up every single day and every minute of the day be reminded in some way or another of your illness? You can't escape it. And with the cannabis, I found that it really helped a lot with that feeling of dread that I have, or that hopelessness for the next day. I felt with the cannabis, at least when I was using it, and it gave me that functionality that I hadn't seen in a while, and it made me more present in the moment. That is what I needed to kind of stir up in my heart to keep with it, to be present for my family, and to make sure that I could stick around to still be with them and help them. So I think a lot of people look at it and they just assume people want to get high, or they look at it for even the pain relief part, just for that moment. But for me, it's so much more. It's giving me a promise that even on my worst days, I have something I can turn to help make it okay. And I haven't been able to say that with any other medication that I've been on. I've tried it the other way. I've tried the injections. I've tried the medications. I continue to try stuff that my neurologist has that comes out, like the CGRPs. But the cannabis really helps getting through that day-to-day life as a patient, while you're still trying all these other methods, while you're doing the therapies and whatever else you need to kind of help you. The cannabis is that special added part that really kind of makes it able for me to keep going.
Well, April, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, and for the advocacy work that you're doing. It's every voice that we can add is just, that much more pressure that we can put on the legislators to make some changes and to give people access to medicine. Man, I'm really hoping in this next legislative session we'll see something break loose, and folks like yourselves will finally have access to that.
Thank you. I really appreciate being able to share my experiences and hopefully shed a little bit different light on this plant, and particularly for veterans, if they want to get more involved, look up Texas NORML, look up Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana, and Texas Veterans for Natural Rights. All these organizations are very welcoming for veterans, and we have people of all abilities in our group, and it's very understanding, and it's a really good place to feel like you're being productive again. And especially for veterans that get out, I think we kind of lose a little bit of ourselves, of the NCO or the officer and those roles that we played in the military. And I can't think of a lot of better places to showcase some of that than being an advocate.
Oh, absolutely. I'll put links to the organizations that you mentioned in the show notes page for today. That way, if folks want to go out to the show notes, they can find those very quickly. Thank you so much again for your time, April. And man, I'm really hoping this law changes. And it sucks that you guys have to wait another 2 years, but maybe we'll get something passed in the next legislative session.
Well, and we'll keep working until it does.
That's right. Because, that's all we can do at this point. And if not, I guess there's always Oklahoma. It's not too far away.
Ooh-wee.
But I mean, I totally understand the struggles with moving with the kids and changing doctors and all that. So yeah, you guys can probably pack a house in about 10 minutes flat, right? With all your expertise.
Well, I think we've gained some experience along the way, but I don't know. I feel like we got a lot of stuff in here now between all the 4 kids, and we could definitely get a go bag. Really.
There you go. I've enjoyed our conversation today, and hope to stay in touch with you, and hopefully get to meet you sometime in a little more quick than just shake hands type situation.
Yes, I would look forward to that.
Sounds great, April. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Show notes for today's episode can be found out at cannabishealsme.com/80. We're going to be back here on Thursday with Matt Grimshaw. Matt is the host of a recent documentary called Vets Grow, and I thought it would be cool on this week where we are honoring our veterans to have him come on and talk about this project, and then talk to us about a project that he's hoping to kick off in 2020 that's also going to involve veterans. So we'll be back here on Thursday. Hope you guys will join us, and thanks for listening today. Have a great week. Hit the subscribe button and you'll never miss an episode of the Cannabis Heals Me podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or whatever podcast app you're using. Do you have a suggestion for a guest on Cannabis Heals Me? Send an email to podcast@cannabishealsme.com. We'd love to hear from you. Please do not take any information from Cannabis Heals Me or its guests as medical advice. Contact your licensed physician before taking cannabis or using it for medical treatments.